Thank you for joining us for Managing Government Records Directive. General Overview, the 5,000-foot level. This is a records management seminar delivered by the United States National Archives and Records Administration's National Records Management Training Program. In this session, Preston Huff will introduce and discuss the Managing Government Records Directive. Now, let's join the seminar.
Today's presentation is by Preston Huff. Preston is the head of the project management team in the Office of the Chief Records Officer of the National Archives and Records Administration, as you see there. Today he's going to give us a high-level overview of the goals set forth in the Managing Government Records Directive. This was jointly issued by OMB and NARA. It was last August. And for those of you who are familiar with it, you know there are a series of goals in that document. And Preston is going to go very high level over those particular goals. To let you know, we do have some additional training plans on each of these down the road. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Preston.
Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to hear from everybody. I recognized a few names there, I think, probably from back in state and local government. I used to be out in the Commonwealth of Virginia and the state of Indiana some time ago. So I've been in the field for a number of years. So a couple of those names that are popping up, I seem to recall. As Jeff said, this is a very general, high-level overview about the directive. And if you're looking for a more detailed and nuanced discussion about the individual goals and how to achieve them, this webinar is not going to provide that level of information. Now, having said that, we are planning additional sessions and other communication in the near future to discuss the goals in greater detail. So this is going to be kind of a race through of all the goals, and again, just kind of skimming the mountaintops. And our mission, what we're trying to accomplish here, is to help you better understand these goals as we work toward reaching the deadlines outlined in the directive. Just for a point of clarification, Managing Government Records Directive is the official name, but you're going to hear it referred to as the Presidential Records Management Directive, or the PRMD. I've heard it referred to as the PMRD, kind of a flip-flop on that, or just the directive. And I tend to call it just the directive. So just kind of want to let you know that you're going to be hearing this thing referred to by different things. And you're also going to hear it called the Presidential Memo. And I'll talk about that in just a second as well. So in this briefing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the goals in the directive in chronological order by the due date of the goal. And you're going to see that most of the goals are due at the end of the calendar year, not the end of the federal fiscal year, which for us ends on September the 30th. So a little bit of a challenge for us there in that it kind of splits the year up for us. But that's how I'm going to present this. So I'm just going to go starting with 2012 when we actually started with the directive all the way to its end date. And I'll provide some of the details on some of these goals and then others not so much. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. All right, as they pointed out in the introduction, my office is called the Project Management Office, or the PMO, and it was stood up to take care of making sure that we hit all the marks with the directive. We are the group at the National Archives that is tasked with tracking the progress on all directive goals to ensure successful implementation. And the goals in the directive are all assigned to various units within NARA. And my team, the PMO team, interfaces with those other teams to make sure that we're on track. By the way, I am located under the Office of the Chief Records Officer, and that is Paul Wester, for those of you that have probably heard him speak at different conferences. He gets around the country, various ARMA chapter meetings, various professional organizations, and often he is the face of communications pertaining to the directive. All right, so what I want to focus on the agenda here is that second bullet, where we have Presidential Memorandum and Managing Government Records Directive. And those are actually two different documents. Presidential Memorandum got the whole thing kicked off. That was signed by the President back on November the 28th, 2011. And it set in forth in motion the Management Government Records Directive, which was jointly issued by the Office of Management Budget, OMB, and NARA back in August of this past year. And then also I'm going to talk about the timeline for the directive implementation. Okay, so this looks familiar. You see the filing cabinet and lots of folders of paper. So when President Obama signed the memorandum back on November 28th, 2011, he stated that the current federal records management system is based on an outdated approach involving paper and filing cabinets. No surprise there, right? And today's action will move the process into the digital age so the American public can have access to clear and accurate information about the decisions and actions of the federal government. So with the memorandum and the directive, you see in part not just a focus on records management, but also on openness of government and access to information. Now, I think probably, you could probably substitute that whole thing of federal records management systems in there, and I would guess that those of you that represent state and local government, probably a similar situation there. Your approach probably is largely paper and filing cabinets, and you have to deal with emerging electronic records, of course. So that got it all kicked off, and it's been 62 years from the time that President Truman signed the Federal Records Act until President Obama signed that presidential memo in late 2011. And it's really not often that you get this kind of attention at this level on records management. So you got to take advantage of the opportunity when you get the chance. And here you see a depiction of President Truman and some officials when President Truman signed the Federal Records Act back in 1950. And then, of course, race forward 62 years later, President Obama issuing the presidential memorandum. Yes, there's been some activity in records management in between, but that's kind of the bookends of the situation, and not a whole lot in between. So to get the attention of the chief executive is a unique opportunity. And I've been in this field for a long, long time, starting off back in the late 1970s. And I can say that this is the first time that I've seen it at this level. So you kind of get one shot at doing it, and you got to get it right. So here are some of the features of the presidential memorandum which got this whole thing started. Basically, good records management is the backbone of open government, and what that basically means is you've got to know what you have before the public can access it. Paul Wester, that chief records officer that I report to, even has some shirts that have been made up, and it talks about the openness of government on the front, alluding to this presidential memorandum, and on the back is the actual depiction of a spine or a backbone going down the back, and he wears that sometimes at conferences or he holds it up for the audience. I don't have my own shirt yet. Second bullet, effort to reform records management policies and practices, documenting agency actions and decisions. That was set in motion with the signing of this memo. And then also set in motion was the development and issuance of a records management directive. So memorandum's kind of high level, and the directive starts getting into the details. Now that on the right-hand side is what the directive actually looks like, and I know you can't read that, but just want to kind of give you the essence of what it looks like, and it is issued by the head of OMB and the head of our agency, the National Archives, David Berrio. So it's jointly issued back on August the 24th, of this past year. And there you see the citation for it. In this particular case, it's called the Presidential Directive, although the real name is Managing Government Records Directive. And it's OMB NARA M-12-18 for those of you that would want to refer to it. That's the official reference to it. It's a 7-page document. And basically there are 2 themes or central goals of the directive. First one, goal number 1, is to require electronic record keeping to ensure transparency, efficiency, and accountability. In essence, it's easier to access, distribute it, and produce such records. Goal number 2, demonstrate compliance with federal records management statutes and regulations. And agencies have to comply with these various existing laws and policies on records management. And also, they have to comply with the provisions of this directive. Okay, the expected benefits of the directive are improved performance and promotion of openness and accountability. So I was talking about earlier, you see that theme over and over in both the memo and the directive about openness, transparency, accountability. Next bullet, further identification and transfer to NARA of the permanently valuable historical records. We can't lose sight of that mission. And third, assistance to executive departments and agencies in minimizing cost and operating more efficiently. And that is especially important in these days of shrinking budgets. And I know it's not just true federal government, which it is true for us, of course, but it's also true for you and state and local government and any other entities that are out there as well. We don't have unlimited resources. Okay, so now we're getting into the nuts and bolts. This is the timeline. And this starts in 2012, as you can see the tab there on the left-hand side, the 2012, and it goes all the way up into the end of this decade. So for 2012, we only had 3 goals. Okay, when you see that 2.2 and that B1 in parentheses, what that refers to is the goal number in the directive. So it's no more mysterious than that. The first goal at the top is that by November the 15th, and I said most of these are at the end of the calendar year. For some reason, November the 15th, the middle of the month, was picked. And I wasn't around for when this was created, so I can't answer why that was. But they split it right in the middle. November the 15th, each agency had to name its senior agency official. Now, what's important about this is that for the first time, we have a senior agency official. Before that, we have records officers only, which are important, and that's how things get done a lot in agencies. But records officers are more in the middle of the agency. And classic records management is that you need to have a champion or a sponsor at the top of the agency pushing records management down. So this is the first time that we've been successful in introducing that concept out there. So now we have it codified, it's out there, and it's not to be confused with the ARO or the agency records officer. You still have to have both. In fact, the senior agency official complements the records officer. They help the records officer in accomplishing good records management practices in the agency. So now we accomplished that, and that's what that little check mark means on the right-hand side. So we have now about over 100 SAOs throughout federal government, and some agencies like Department of Defense have multiple SAOs. As you can imagine, Department of Defense is a big, big enterprise and has different branches, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the secretary. So there's a lot going on in Department of Defense, and they needed several SAOs there. Some agencies only have one, and some agencies have none at all, or at least at the agency level, but they may have it and they do have it at the cabinet level. So what has to happen is that the cabinet and the agency have to work out what level that they're going to have an SAO at. So you can have an SAO at the cabinet that's also responsible for all the agencies below that level. But all cabinets have to have an SAO, and they do have SAOs. All right, then the next bullet, that B1 in the middle, it wasn't enough just to have the SAOs named. We then had to pull them together and have a kickoff meeting, which we did do on November the 28th. And that was at the main archives building in downtown Washington. That's where the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and Declaration of Independence are located. So we had the meeting at the SAOs there, and the Archivists of the United States convened that meeting, and we shared with the SAOs what they're on the hook for, what are the responsibilities of the SAOs. Now, that November the 28th date is significant in that it just coincided with the one-year anniversary of the signing of the memo, so it's kind of symbolic. All right, so the check mark means that that was accomplished, of course. Now, as it says there, though, it's periodic. We do not have another SAO meeting scheduled, but we will be discussing when the next SAO meeting will be. We don't know at this point if they're going to be annual or twice a year or just how frequent, but it is intended that they would be periodic. And then the second part of that same goal required that the National Archives was to complete a review of all of our records management reporting requirements by the end of the year. And we have been requesting a lot of information from all federal government about their records management programs. A lot of requirements coming from different areas within the National Archives. So we've reviewed those requirements, or my colleagues in the Records Management Oversight section led by Cindy Smolovich. They have completed that review, and now what they'll be working on in 2013 is to come up with a new report template to try to streamline the process and have hopefully a single annual report that's easier to complete, but yet still effective, and it just results in a better reporting mechanism. And the review completion was fulfilled at the end of the month, last month. So 2012 is completed. Now we get into 2013. And the directive really loads up on 2013. It's the busiest year in terms of the number of goals. Between 2013 and coupled with 2012, about 70% of all the goals of the directive are due in those 2 years. So by the end of this year, we will have accomplished a big chunk of the directive. And the first goal up there, 1.1, each agency is to develop and begin to implement plans to achieve this particular goal. They're supposed to start that in this year, 2013. But ultimately, by 2019, all permanent electronic records will be managed electronically to the fullest extent possible for eventual transfer and accessioning by the National Archives in electronic format. So if it starts electronic, to the maximum extent possible, it'll stay electronic. So that's quite a switch for us by the end of this decade. The next goal, 1.2, beginning August 24th, which coincides with the one-year anniversary of the issuance of the directive. That's why it has that strange date of August 24th there. So beginning August 24th, each agency must report annually to OMB and to the National Archives the status of this particular goal, which is that by 2016, agencies will manage both permanent and temporary email records in accessible electronic format. And then the third goal there, 2.2, the senior agency official shall ensure that permanent records that have been in existence for more than 30 years are identified for transfer and reported to the National Archives. Now, mainly, these are for paper records. Most of the directive pertains to electronic records, but a little bit does pertain to analog formats. Let me explain the 2.5 as I understand it. What you're looking at up here at 2013 in the top bullet, the 2.5, the records officers from the agencies are to work with the National Archives to identify all unscheduled records. And at the National Archives, we treat unscheduled records the same as permanent records. It means you can't dispose of those records. They're kind of in limbo. They're kind of in purgatory. So they need to get scheduled. So this, and the key word there is identify. It doesn't say, you know, that an action has to take place other than we need to get a handle on what's out there. So we're trying to get a handle on how many unscheduled records we have out there, whether they be stored in the National Archives Federal Record Centers throughout the country, or if they're in the agency's record storage facilities and that they have not been properly scheduled yet. And when I talk about the agency's record storage facilities, I say that kind of loosely because in some cases they may be your off-site vendor. Not everybody's required, no one's required to come to the Federal Record Centers for the storage of their records. So you may store records with a commercial facility, and that's fine. But if you have unscheduled records there, we need to identify those. If you have them in facilities within your agency, and many agencies do, we need to also capture that information about what is unscheduled. A1 in the middle there. NARA completes and makes available revised guidance, including metadata requirements for transferring permanent electronic records to include additional sustainable formats commonly used to meet agency business needs. Now, this goal is being addressed by Kevin DeForcy, who's the supervisor here at the National Archives in the unit that's called the Electronic Records Format Section. And my group talked to Kevin about this, and looks like he's on track for meeting that particular goal. 8.2 at the bottom, National Archives issues new guidance that describes methods for managing, disposing, and transferring email. The Records Management Policy section is the unit that's addressing this goal, and you know they have put together some information on email guidance already, but more email guidance, more definitive email guidance is forthcoming. It's coming out later this year. Sticking with 2013, A3.1. This is a really robust goal. And this goal is being tackled by Meg Phillips of the Chief Operating Officers Organization. It's also called COO, C-O-O. And Meg has put together a draft work plan already. She met with my team on this recently. And she's also presenting at the Federal Records Council in Washington later this month about this goal and her progress on putting that comprehensive plan. What this says is that the National Archives will produce this records management solutions, make sure it's economically viable for automated records management solutions in conjunction with the Federal Chief Information Officer Council and the Federal Records Council, FRC. You know, some people see FRC and they think Federal Record Centers. In this particular case, it means Federal Records Council and other stakeholders. Now, she's tasked with producing a comprehensive plan to describe suitable approaches for the automated management of email, social media, and other types of digital record content, including advanced search techniques. And that plan has to detail the expected outcomes and then also identify any potential risk. So quite a task. Her plan is in itself very comprehensive. And of course she's got until the end of the year to put together her comprehensive plan, and she's well underway working on that. A41, NARA incorporates into existing reporting requirements an annual agency update on new cloud initiatives, including a description of how each new initiative meets the FRC obligations, or FRA obligations, and the goals outlined in this directive. For this initial report, each agency will identify any existing use of cloud services or storage and the date of implementation. So basically this is a reporting requirement. But we want to get an idea of, in the federal government out there, what's happening, how many agencies are going to cloud, and just where they are in implementation. Now we got anecdotal information. We know GSA and even the National Archives is using cloud. So there are a number of agencies that are doing that. We just want to get more information on that. And that note you see in parentheses at the end there, the next revision of OMB Circular A130 explicitly will require agencies to incorporate records management requirements when moving to cloud-based services or storage solutions. Now, we do not know when the next revision to the circular will be. Staying again with 2013, I told you it was a busy year. A5, NARA determines the feasibility of establishing a secure cloud-based service to store and manage unclassified electronic records on behalf of agencies. That effort is being led by David Miller of the Federal Records Center program. And he sent me some information earlier today, and he has a plan attached to his, and I think he's well underway to successfully achieving this goal as well. He's a pretty sharp guy, and he's got a good idea about how to address this. B1 in the middle, that's where we were talking about that single annual report, and it comes from the senior agency official to the chief records officer, and this is an odd date because everything else just about is end of calendar year. This one starts October 1st. So October 1st of this year, the SAO is on the hook for sending a single annual report to the chief records officer. Of course, we describe what will be in that single annual report because we're putting the template together for them. B2 at the bottom, the National Archives, in conjunction with the Federal Chief Information Officer Council and the Federal Records Council and other government-wide councils that might express interest, establish a community of interest, or a COI, to bring together leaders from the IT, legal counsel, records management communities to solve specific records management challenges. And the COI is going to develop and propose guidance, share information, create training, and identify tools that support e-records management. Now, the intent of this COI is that it gives federal agencies a forum led by them, not the National Archives, for them to brainstorm big issues. The National Archives, at least this is the intent as I understand it, becomes the facilitator to pull this together for the agencies. But the agencies want a forum for doing best practices and sharing information with each other instead of NARA telling them you need to do it this way or you need to do it that way. So it's more collaborative. And some of the agencies had asked for this as we were putting this together, and it got into the directive as a community of interest. The Records Management Policy Unit here at the National Archives is charged with bringing this to conclusion. and they were just assigned that task, and they're working on it now. Again, staying with 2013, B3. This is Office of Personnel Management establishes a formal records management occupational job series to elevate records management roles, responsibilities, and skill sets for agency records officers and other records professionals. Now, we've used other job series like Archives job series here at the National Archives since eons ago. Most of them are archival specialists, archival technician type positions, and records management is just taps into that. So this would set up a new series just for the records management profession, and that's pretty exciting. And then in the agencies, it's been described to me that they use kind of a hodgepodge of position descriptions as well. And this is my particular goal. This one has been assigned directly to me. And I will work with our Human Capital Office as well as OPM and all of the stakeholder groups in the National Archives. And then I'll work with many of the agencies. I will solicit input from all agencies on how we're putting this together. And we will be finished with this by the end of this year, and hopefully it's as successful as we aim it to be. And I think this one's a pretty exciting one because we in the records management profession have not had this at the federal level. So this is significant, I think. B4. National Archives will identify a government-wide analytical tool, aka maturity model, and that's to evaluate the effectiveness of records management programs. Of course, what an analytical tool or a maturity model will show you is where are your weaknesses, and then you in the agency can begin to address that and focus your resources and your time and effort on fixing problems that you've got. So we have a few federal agencies that are using maturity models, and we at the National Archives are working with them to get more information on how they're doing it. And of course, in other areas outside of government, a lot of the private sectors using maturity models as well, and other governments are. Australia and England, Canada, etc. Different places are using maturity models as well. So we're getting a lot of information from a lot of different areas in this regard. Cindy Smolovic of our compliance group is tasked with putting that one together. And the last goal on this page, 2.1, and by November the 15th and each subsequent year, all agencies will reaffirm or name any new senior agency official. So when I talked about that first date, November the 15th in 2012, that they had to name, that was for the initial naming of their senior agency official, but we didn't want to leave it that way. So each year, they have to reaffirm who their SAO is. And let me explain a little bit about the SAO too. The senior agency official, the way the directive is worded is that that person is supposed to be at the assistant secretary level or equivalent, and they're responsible for coordinating with the agency records officer and appropriate agency officials to ensure compliance with all records management statutes and regulations. The SAO must be located within the agency so as to make adjustments to agency practices, personnel, and funding as may be necessary to ensure compliance and support that program. So again, good classic records management, having a champion at the top who has the vested interest in your success. All right, 2014. Not a whole lot of goals, but some important goals. The first one there, 2.3, the records officer for each agency must hold the NARA Certificate of Federal Records Management Training, and the new incumbents must possess the certificate within 1 year of assuming the position of agency records officer. The details surrounding that I don't have right now because it's being worked on. Bill Bridges is the supervisor of our records management training program, and he and his team are looking at that, working on that now. Related to that, 2.4, right below it, all agencies must establish a method to inform all employees of their records management responsibilities in law and policy, and develop suitable records management training for the appropriate staff. So there's certainly going to be more of an emphasis, I think, by virtue of this, on specific records management training for records-related staff, but also, like you see on the federal side, in federal agencies, whether you name the topic, ethics, whatever, we have all kinds of different training that goes out to all employees, and some agencies have already begun to do this, and they can serve as models for us to look at as to how to do that and if it's working in their agency. But Bill Bridges has until the end of 2014 to pull together a strategy to inform agencies of how we can be effective at doing this. So all agencies are on the hook for establishing a method to inform all of their employees about records management. That's pretty good, and that's pretty necessary to keep us out of the headlines of the news. At the bottom, 3.2, the Federal Chief Information Officer Council and the Federal Records Council, working with the National Archives, will obtain external involvement for the development of open source records management solutions. That's similar to a couple of the other goals. We don't have anybody assigned to this one yet. We're discussing it. And it could be that somebody that's on the hook for doing one of these other goals might end up doing the open source one as well. So we'll see. 2015, NARA will improve the current request for records disposition authority process, and that is consistent with current records management statutes or with changes to existing statutes if required. NARA will also develop the criteria that agencies can apply to the scheduling, appraisal, and overall management of temporary records that can be effectively monitored with appropriate NARA oversight. Rachel Bantonkin, who is an appraisal team supervisor, is the lead of this project, and she met with our team and she produced a 3-year plan which addresses this goal. So I think they're well on their way to tackling that one as well. 2016, agencies must manage all email records in electronic format. I discussed that very briefly earlier. Email records must be retained in appropriate electronic systems that support records management and litigation requirements, which may include preservation in place models, including the capability to identify, retrieve, and retain the records for as long as they are needed. And as I said before, NARA is to release new email guidance later this year. 2.5, senior agency officials shall work with the agency records officer to ensure that record schedules have been submitted to us for all existing paper and other non-electronic records. So basically it's going back to make sure that the analog records have been addressed, as well as e-records that are in other parts of this directive. In 2017, to reduce the need for unique record schedules submitted for approval to the archivist. The National Archives, in consultation with appropriate oversight agencies, will make substantive changes to the GRS, or General Record Schedules. These significant changes will include combining the record series into more appropriate aggregations for easier disposition action by the agencies, and expanding the number of permanent record series in the GRS to reduce the scheduling and appraisal burdens on agencies. The aim is to ensure capture of permanent records while making it easier on agencies and NARA. So kind of the big bucket concept here. And the person that's in charge of that is Andrea Riley, who's the supervisor of the GRS team. 2018, we have no specific goals that are due for completion that year. However, there's going to be directive-related activities such as ongoing reports, ongoing training, attending meetings, that reaffirmation of the SAOs. All of that will be going on that year just the same as any other year. 2019, all permanent electronic records will be managed electronically to the fullest extent possible for eventual transfer and essentially by NARA in that electronic format. And agencies have to begin the plan for that in 2013. And then that last bullet there is a note that by the end of this decade, the goals of the directive shall have been fulfilled. And the result should be that agencies have, to the fullest extent possible, eliminated the use of paper and embraced the use of electronic record keeping. So the directive is kind of NARA's, I know it's kind of a cliche, but it's kind of our moonshot in that it is ambitious, and it's like President Kennedy's goal back in the early 1960s that we're aiming at a transformation by the end of the decade. And, you know, you don't get these chances very often, so you have to take advantage of them when they come about. So the end of 2019 is the end of the decade and end of the provisions of the directive. You can send your questions to prmd@nara.gov, prmd@nara.gov, and then that comes to my team, and then we are like a clearinghouse, and we'll send it out to the appropriate area for the best answers to your question. We'll get you to the source within the National Archives. We'll get you to the subject matter experts if we can't answer it ourselves. Or feel free to contact me, as Paulette said. And also keep in mind that we have what is called Records Express blog, and we are constantly putting information out there about the directive, and that's http://blogs.archives.gov/records-express/. Or you can just find it at the National Archives page at the bottom. Just click on blogs, and Records Express is one of the blogs available from our home page. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate you attending.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this seminar useful. For more information about the U.S. National Records Management Training Program, please visit www.archives.gov. Also, our current workshop schedule for face-to-face and online workshops is available at nara.learn.com.